right, good morning, everyone. It's certainly a great pleasure to be here today in Tirana. Sadly, this is the last panel of the conference, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be the best. So let's start. What I would like to do before handing the floor to my fantastic panelists, we missed the son of Tirana, but we have the 4 new shining stars of the IAIS with me. I would like to say a few introductory remarks just to set the scene. And as you have already heard across the conference, we have made some changes to the IAIS committees. And this session will provide us the opportunity to delve deeper into what the changes are and to explore what they will mean in practice. So, as I said, for this, we are joined by the newly appointed chairs of these committees. And when I say newly, they were actually appointed last Wednesday. So they absolutely wanted to give their first words in their new capacity to this audience. And I thank them very much for that, appreciating that, of course, this is an element of challenge. It's a bit of a baptism by fire. So, join me in welcoming on stage Vicky White. You are the chair of the Implementation Assessment Committee. Fazana Badat, you are the co-chair of the Standards and Supervisory Practices Committee. Dieter Hendricks, chair of the Monitoring and Risk Assessment Committee. And last but not least, Judy French, co-chair of the Standards and Supervisory Practices Committee. In a minute, I would ask you to introduce yourself, but let me first offer a preliminary explanations of the committee changes. And if I can have the slide behind me. Well, so until now, you have been familiar with the Macroprudential Committee, the MPC, the Policy Development Committee, the PDC, and the Implementation and Assessment Committee, the IAC. And these committees have actually existed in their current form and their current names since 2018. However, starting on the 1st of January 2026, we will have instead the Monitoring and Risk Assessment Committee, the MRC, the Standards and Supervisory Practices Committee, the SSC, and the Implementation Assessment Committee, the IAC. And this is getting subtle here, because for the Implementation Assessment Committee, the difference is that we have removed the "and" in the name. The former name was Implementation and Assessment Committee, and now it's Implementation Assessment Committee. And this new name reflects a more focused mandate, purely centered on assessing implementation. On the slide behind us, you can see a short statement of the objective of each committee. The MRC will oversee the monitoring of key risks and trends into the global insurance sector and propose responses thereto. The SSC will set and maintain effective, proportionate, and globally recognized supervisory standards, and will also support members' efforts to implement these standards, including by sharing good practices, enhancing understanding of supervisory issues, and facilitating capacity building. The IAC will oversee assessment of comprehensive and globally consistent implementation of the IAIS standards. I think it's important to note that these changes do not result in any net addition or loss of the work by the IAIS. The core objectives of the IAIS continue to be as we set out in our strategic plan for 2025 to 2029. The committee changes are more a redistribution of the oversight responsibilities among the committees. In this slide, you also see a simplified depiction of how the responsibilities of the current parent committees, MPC, PDC, and IAC, transition to the new three committees. Notably, the new Standards and Supervisory Practices Committee will inherit the responsibilities of the former Policy Development Committee, whilst also taking on the implementation support activities that were previously overseen by the IAC. This will allow the new IAC to focus on a dedicated manner on assessing the implementation of standards. And furthermore, we believe that these synergies between developing standards and supporting members to put standards into practice are very important and will help if they are consolidated, when they will be consolidated, both within a single committee, as I mentioned. So I think I've done enough speaking now, and I would like now to bring the new chairs into the conversation. And for that, let me start by asking each of you to introduce yourself, and maybe we can start with you, Vicky.
Certainly, thank you. And Roman, I think you said that we'd been appointed last Wednesday, but actually only 36 hours ago, so really not very long at all. I'm Vicky White. I'm Director of Insurance and Cross-Sectoral Policy at the UK PRA, and I've been a member of the IAC for the last 18 months, which means that I am incredibly conscious of the importance of the role that I'm taking on. And I have to say that it's an absolute honour to be following Peter, the current chair, who, as many of you here will know, has given so much to the committee over the last 6 years as chair, but also over many, many more years than that to the IAIS as a whole. I'm really looking forward to working closely with Peter to ensure a smooth transition. And equally, as we're about to discuss, the reduced scope of the committee in the new structure really doesn't imply less work. In fact, I think it's fair to say we're about to have one of the busiest years yet. From an implementation perspective. And so I'm very grateful to ExCo for entrusting me with this responsibility. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vicky. Fazana?
Merci, Roman. Good morning, everyone. So this is definitely a baptism of fire, especially for Vicky, Judy, and myself. Not so much Dira. He's an old hat at this. Let me start by thanking the team at the Albanian Financial Services of Supervisory Authority for hosting us in Tirana. It's really been such an experience exploring the city, and we'll remember it as a special city for a very long time. So thank you very much. As you've heard, my name is Fazana. I'm Deputy Commissioner at the Financial Sector Conduct Authority in South Africa. The FSCA is the dedicated market conduct and market integrity regulator for the financial system in South Africa. On December 1st, coming up, I will be exactly 4 years in this role. And prior to that, I was a member of the IAIS Secretariat. So it's like coming home. But I have been involved in the IAIS as a member for over 10 years. And with that, I am very thankful to the ExCo to be entrusted not just with the opportunity to serve the broader IAIS membership, but particularly to be given this opportunity to help elevate the efforts of the IAIS in supporting more specifically the needs, the priorities, and the challenges of EMDEs. But I also want to say it's such a pleasure to share this responsibility with Judy, and I so look forward to working with you going forward. And to Dita, I know this is new for you. I hope you're not overwhelmed by all the women surrounding you, and I hope you can get used to it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Fazana. And Dita?
Well, let me say I'm happy to contribute to the gender diversity of the new group of parent committee chairs. So I also like to thank the brave people still in the audience. I know it takes courage to hold on to the end of a conference. Unfortunately, I'm not as new as exciting as my fellow committee chairs. I've been chairing the previous macroprudential committee since June 2020, and I'm happy to continue the work under a new name now. For those of you that may not know me yet, my name is Dieter Hendricks, and I work at the National Bank of Belgium, and also been involved since a long time now in all macroprudential work at IAIS, even at working group level previously. So I'll stop here.
Thank you very much, Dieter. And last but not least, Judy.
Yes, thank you, Roman. Good afternoon. Hi, everybody. I am Judy French. I'm the director for the Department of Insurance for the state of Ohio. Now, I know it can be a little difficult and confusing to distinguish among all of the states within the US and then to distinguish with the NAIC, but each state is an independent insurance regulator. So that means that my department regulates all of the companies the insurance companies who do business within the state of Ohio. About 250 of them are headquartered in Ohio, and it's one of the major drivers really within our economy. So I have been thrilled over the past 5 years to collaborate with my NAIC colleagues and to collaborate on all things insurance as regulators. So it also brings me great joy to take this next step, collaborating with all of you and with the regulators within the IAIS. So I'm very honored to be co-chairing the SSC and look forward to a great year.
All right, thank you very much. And I think this really speaks about the wisdom of our executive committee to make such beautiful appointments. So congratulations to you. I think we can now start our conversation. I would like in the first round of the discussion to look back at the many achievements of 2025. And of course, as you said, Vicky, it's also an opportunity to express our gratitude to the former chairs, Peter Braumüller, the chair of the IAC, Matt Walker, chair of the PDC, and also Ricardo Garcia and Paolo Cadoni, who have been the acting chair for the PDC over the last month. And of course, to Dieter, I don't know if Dieter is around for his previous role, as the chair of the MPC. But now, let's try to look back and to reflect on 2025. So I would like to ask you, each of you, to share with us maybe what you think are the one or two key achievements of the IAIS, and maybe to look at that, the idea would be to follow the 4 core objectives that the IAIS has in its strategic plan. And so maybe I'll start by the first objective, the first core objective, monitoring and risks, key risks and trends. And for that, Dieter, I can give you the floor.
Thank you, Romain. Well, it's difficult not to talk again about the issues paper, I'm sorry. But I think it's, with the publication coming up very soon, I think it's a major achievement of the former MPC to be able to finalize that issues paper. We've discussed already quite a lot about the issues paper also yesterday in the panel. So please look forward to the publication of that paper coming up in the next few weeks. And I would just like to simply add that it's been really a good example of how we have engaged with the stakeholders in going from the draft version of the issues paper to the final version. We've received more than 533 comments. It has taken us a while to take those on board. And I hope that you will all be happy when you see the final version of the paper, which again, I believe is a very important piece of work to make sure that IAIS has its voice represented in this debate. Now, we do some other stuff as well at the MPC, and looking forward also to the new MRC. And one of the key elements already since the adoption of the holistic framework end of 2019 is our global monitoring exercise, the yearly exercise in which we ask insurers and jurisdictions to participate to our monitoring. It's really the key tool that we use to monitor the key risk and trends, to decide and to see whether there are any pockets of systemic risk and whether there is a need to mitigate that. Again, I would like to emphasize that this year we've had 57 insurers participating, 58 members, it's an all-time record. And all in all, we can represent more than 90% of the global written premium. I think it makes the global monitoring exercise really the place to be if you want to learn about the main risk and trends in the global insurance sector. Within our global monitoring exercise, I think one of the important pieces of work that we've finalized this year, as well as a 3-year review cycle where we look at our methodology that we use to try to measure the key risk and trends and ultimately systemic risk. We end up now in a key year again, at the end of that 3-year cycle where FSB, as you know, has been reviewing our methodology and will express his opinion very soon on again, hopefully confirming that the holistic framework in general and the GME more specific is really a great tool. Last but not least, another advertisement, look forward to the GMAR. You know that it's our main tool to communicate on the key risk and trends. It will be published beginning of December. And I'd like to point out again that the main risk, the main themes that we cover are geo-economic fragmentation, private credit exposures, and the adoption of AI. So really 3 key themes that we see are of interest to anyone who would like to follow what is happening at the level of the global insurance sector.
Well, thank you very much, Dieter. Certainly a very busy year and a lot of publications coming up. That would be fantastic gifts for Christmas for everyone. So let's move on now to the core objective 2, which will be overseen by the Standards and Supervisory Practices Committee. So the core objective 2 being to set and maintain global insurance standards. So maybe for that, I can turn to you, Judy.
Yes, and first I just want to reiterate what you said, Roman, about the prior leadership and what we will be building on based on their leadership. I really want to thank again Matt Walker, the former chair, and Ricardo and Paolo for their efforts, and of course to all of those members of PDC for what they've accomplished. We're going to be building on that. But going back to what they've been able to achieve, really the standard setting efforts for the PDC, have been focused on the ICS, or the Insurance Capital Standard. So following the late 2024 adoption of the ICS, the year has brought important progress developing the new ICS-related standards on supervisory reporting and public disclosure. So that is work that we expect to finish over the next year. At the same time, we're also seeing progress on efforts to help members enhance their observance of IAIS supervisory materials and then address key trends in the insurance sector with our stronger focus on implementation support. So an area that my co-chair will be looking at closely to ensure that standard setting work is completed with practical implementation guidance.
So Fazana, can you speak about for you the key achievement on the core objective 3, which will now be overseen by the Standards and Supervisory Practices Committee?
So that was a great segue. We're already coordinating, Judy. Building on what Judy said, when it comes to core objective 3, it's true that actually the development of supporting material has really gained momentum this past year. We've also deepened our collaboration with our implementation partners, with regional bodies to promote capacity building and peer exchange. But for me, 2 highlights, key implementation support highlights, has been the work of the forums, particularly the work of the Risk-Based Solvency Implementation Forum, as well as the FinTech Forum. The Risk-Based Solvency Implementation Forum this past year, again in a collaborative exercise, worked very closely with the IMF to develop guidance on transitioning to a risk-based solvency framework. And this is also particularly valuable because this transitioning to risk-based solvency is also one of the aspects that consistently comes up as a high priority for emerging market jurisdictions in terms of implementation support. The guideline obviously outlines certain key characteristics around economic conditions, market developments, etc. But it's also very practical for supervisors. So it talks about things like project planning, stakeholder management, and all of this actually draws directly from IAIS member experiences themselves. So again, elevating the value of peer exchange and information exchange. And again, to support this work, we've also been engaging directly with supervisors through public webinars, through seminars, as well as having developed a self-paced training module together with another one of our key implementation partners, the Financial Stability Institute. I think continuing on this vein going forward, and we will talk about future work, but I did want to highlight the risk-based solvency implementation framework forum will also expand their work to do similar guidance around ORSA implementation, as well as understanding the implications of IFRS 17. And these are, again, two key topics that keep coming up from our emerging market members. So I think this is extremely important. When it comes to emerging and accelerating risks, of course, our FinTech Forum has been monitoring developments, but they've also now pivoted to development of application papers. So there was an application paper that was published in July this year around the supervision of artificial intelligence, but they are also working on more practical tools like an information bank to help supervisors engage a lot more effectively with entities around AI and digital innovation. And I've already mentioned to implementation partners, but I have to highlight that all of this work that's been done to strengthen implementation support could not have been done without the dedicated contributions of our implementation partners. So I'd like to take this opportunity to just recognize Access to Insurance Initiative, the Financial Stability Institute, the International Actuarial Association, the IMF, the Frankfurt School, the Toronto Center. All of these actually help deliver the support through training and sharing of skills for supervisors on a day-to-day basis as they navigate the evolving risks shaping the landscape. This strengthening of these frameworks and practices will remain a priority, but we will also look for more inclusive and practical ways to support our members going forward. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Fazana. And of course, we're very glad to have the implementation partners here in Tirana, and they've been able to, we had this implementation cafe, which was also an opportunity to engage with them. So very nice. Let's move on to the last core objective, not the least, core objective 4, and I will turn to you, Vicky, on this one.
Thanks, Roman. Yep, so I'm going to say the word implementation an incredible number of times, I think, in the next couple of minutes. So a very busy year already. Our implementation assessments aim to support the diverse membership, recognizing the varying stages of implementation of the IAIS standards and the unique challenges faced by different jurisdictions. I think that's probably quite an important point to make, even if it's a very obvious one, but we really do focus hard on that. And so to that end, we've delivered several key initiatives this year, including completing peer review processes, delivering member assessment programs, launching the self-assessment tool, and developing a dashboard to track outcomes. And I think it's important, again, to stress that these efforts have been particularly tailored to assist the emerging and developing economies in our membership. If I was asked to highlight one key achievement, and I think that was the question, then I think it would be the Holistic Framework Implementation Assessment projects. So these comprehensive global implementation initiatives demonstrate the IAIS's commitment to promoting financial stability and addressing systemic risks in the global insurance sector. Now, I did say one key achievement, but please ready yourselves for a lot of numbers and stats as I break this down a bit. So 2 major milestones within that have been achieved this year: the second targeted jurisdictional assessment, or TGA, and a second round of progress monitoring. So building on the 2022 TGA, the 2025 TGA expanded its scope to 6 additional jurisdictions. And they were Australia, Bermuda, Italy, Singapore, South Africa, and Spain. And these covered 23 insurance core principles and COMFRAME standards across 3 thematic areas. First, the IAIG identification and macroprudential supervision, liquidity risk management and disclosure, and third, crisis management, recovery planning, and resolution frameworks. The 2025 TGA highlighted significant progress in most areas, whilst also identifying remaining gaps in resolution planning, resolution powers, and liquidity risk management practices. And in addition, the IAIS conducted a second round of progress monitoring exercises in 2025 to track progress in addressing gaps identified in the 10 jurisdictions that had been covered in the 2022 TGAs. Is everyone keeping up with all of this? These exercises revealed steady progress, with jurisdictions implementing legislative amendments, strengthening supervisory frameworks, and addressing gaps in critical areas. And the holistic framework implementation assessments have greatly enhanced our ability to identify, mitigate systemic risks within the insurance sector. They provide a comprehensive and consistent approach to implementation, ensuring jurisdictions are better prepared to address financial stability risks and, crucially, protect policyholders. So I think these achievements not only reinforce our role as the IAIS as a trusted global standard setter, but also, equally importantly, serve as a key contribution to the Financial Stability Board's forthcoming review of the holistic framework. I'll stop there, Roman.
Yes, thank you very much, Vicky. I think we've seen that it's been a very busy year and that all the core objectives have a lot of activities and key achievements. This was the first year, actually, of the implementation of the new strategic plan. And I think it really shows that it's very crucial to have the best possible structure and organization in order to deliver. So now in this part of the discussion, I would like to go back to the new structure and try to maybe highlight what we can expect from it and the rationale behind the change in the organization. So maybe I will start by the veteran, Dieter. We are moving from the MPC to the MRC. Is the change in focus? What can we expect as a difference from this move from the MPC to the MRC?
Well, you can expect, first of all, much of the same being continued into the future. Now, not to disappoint everyone, there are a few nuances. So we have been, the MPC, the Macroprudential Committee, was created in 2018, which was even before we adopted the holistic framework. And the focus in the meanwhile has been really on the monitoring of risk and trends from a global perspective. So the macroprudential nature of the committee was shifted towards a broader scope already. And I think what we see now in the new name is that reality being reflected, saying that we monitor and we assess risks across the globe for the entire insurance sector. That way, I think the name allowed us to a bit more clearly reflect that reality. And for instance, under the global monitoring exercise, we want to emphasize our two purposes. Generally assess all the relevant risks and trends, but also to identify and, if needed, mitigate systemic risks. So it really comes together. And you've seen, for instance, that during COVID, we shifted very quickly to make sure that we had a monitoring that was specifically adapted to the situation as we knew it back then. Secondly, the mandate that has been reviewed under these governance changes has also enabled us, I believe, to be clearer on the distinctive role of the MRC in identifying and analyzing issues and providing recommendations as well for follow-up work. The issues paper is a very good example of that. We've monitored risk and trends, and at the end of the paper, we also suggest a way forward, and that way forward may be taken up by some of the other parent committees. Two more nuances. I think, what could we do better, and what are we going to try to do better under the new name? I think engagements towards EMD jurisdictions will be key. We are truly wanting to achieve a global monitoring exercise, and getting on board more and more jurisdictions is really one of the goals that we would like to achieve. Another element is the importance of the interactions and the feedback loops between the risk monitoring at IAIS, the recommendations that follow from that, and the interaction with the other committees, but may come back to that in more detail later on. Thanks, Romain.
Thank you, Dieter. So one of the key change in this new organization is the fact that now we are combining the standard setting and the work on supporting effective supervisory practices and capacity building, all of that within a single committee, the Standards and Supervisory Practices Committee. So I would like to come back to that and maybe ask you, Judy, what was the strategic rationale for doing so, and what can we expect in terms of maybe efficiency from this change?
Well, it's definitely the biggest change in the new structure, but it's not a change that really came out of nowhere. Previously, as you've all heard now, we had the implementation and assessment, the IAC committee, and now that will just be the Implementation Assessment Committee under Vicky, of course. But the core objectives laid out in the strategic plan for 2025 to 2029 separated those out from one another in the design of its core objectives. And the new committee structure really arises from that new design. So you can really see these separate objectives build on each other, where you have Objective 2, setting and maintaining standards. Objective 3, supporting members to implement the standards and build capacity. And then Objective 4, assessing the implementation. So the new SSC has within its charges standard setting and supporting implementation. As I mentioned earlier, the PDC was very successful in its implementation, in developing the standards. So we can expect a lot less activity around that. That's not to rule out that at some point in time we might want to, there could be a need for maybe some targeted refinements of the standards, but for now we'll be maintaining our standards within SSC. So what we see in the strategic plan then is really a shift towards a greater emphasis on supporting members' efforts to implement the standards, including by developing supporting material on supervisory practices and facilitating peer exchange forums. That's where the IAIS sees great potential to deliver highly valued support to its members. So the decision to put those things together under the oversight of one committee reflects the view that there's a great synergy there in combining the oversight of the standards development and maintenance with the oversight of the efforts to assist members in implementing those standards through effective supervisory practices. The two really go hand in hand. So to sum up, the same committee will develop the standard, maintain the standard, and then develop the application paper, whose purpose is to provide advice, illustrations, recommendations, and examples of good practice to supervisors. The committee will do this with the benefit of the developed close knowledge of the subject. I think it's going to result in a good structure and good work products going forward.
Thank you, Judy. Now I would like to come back to simple arithmetic. We have 3 newly established committees, but we have 4 chairs on the stage. So maybe it's good time to come to another change, which is the introduction of the co-chairs for the SSC. One co-chair being from EMDs. So I would like to turn to you, Fazana, as the co-chair from EMD, and if you could share with us how you envision this change will benefit to our EMD members, and how do you see your role to bring the EMD perspective in the work of this committee?
Thanks, Roman. So firstly, I think the introduction of a co-chair model is a great innovation for the IAIS. And I don't just say that because I've been appointed as a co-chair, right? But in all seriousness, I think it's quite an impactful step as the IAIS sharpens its focus on implementation, because as we've heard, there's a lot that needs to happen with implementation and implementation support. But more importantly, I think directly to your question, it demonstrates very clearly the IAIS's commitment to serving a diverse membership, to bridging voices and aligning perspectives from both developed and developing economies. You know, we know that about 45% of our membership are from EMDEs. And speaking as an EMDE supervisor, I can affirm that EMDE voices bring very unique insights and perspectives. And it's quite important for these perspectives to help shape the work of the IAIS in order to ensure that we have a global insurance landscape that's not just thriving, but that's truly resilient and inclusive. I think the strategic plan itself acknowledges the commitment to this, and by requiring one of the co-chairs to be specifically from an EMDE jurisdiction, I think reflects a very strong and express recognition of not just the opportunity, but the value of EMDEs, a strong EMD voice in developing supervisory and supporting material. So as Judy said, there's going to be strengthened intersection between the standard setting and the supervisory supporting work. This model allows for greater leadership and visibility from an EMDE perspective, but it also allows more direct opportunities to engage with EMDEs and speak more credibly with EMD members around their unique perspectives, their unique priorities and challenges. There's several ways that we would aim to do this. And of course, this doesn't mean inconsistency in standards. All this does, it means it enhances the development of the material. So there's a balance between ensuring that our material is globally consistent, but also proportionate to things like market development, supervisory maturity, and the particular characteristics of EMDEs. I think there's probably 3 key ways that we can do this. One is by embedding EMD perspectives in all IAIS material. Again, we make sure that the material is globally consistent but able to be applied locally. Dieter's spoken about the global monitoring exercise. I know that there's opportunities to collect EMDE-specific data and share that with other committees, which that will then enrich the broader standard setting work, the broader implementation assessment work. I mean, I've spoken a lot in my previous response about the importance of collaboration, our implementation partners. I think what this new structure will do is actually help enhance coordination and focus of these structures so that we can better and more intentionally embed EMDE views and perspectives. I think ultimately, I mean, as I've said, and I must repeat this, the new co-chair model help and strengthen the strategic voice of EMDEs across the IAIS. And again, I'm very thankful to be able to take on this responsibility. And I look forward to working with Judy and the EXCO to make sure that IAI's EMDE voices remain visible and central to all of the work of the IAIS. That's our ambition. Thank you.
No, thank you very much, Fazana, for these strong words and highlighting how important it is to have the AMD perspective, needs, and really reflected in the way we work and in what we deliver. So now I would like to go to the IAC, and I move from arithmetics to grammar, because basically we say that the main difference is that we have dropped one word, the end, which means a more focused work on implementation assessment. So Vicky, I would like to hear from you, how does this change will enable the delivery of a very ambitious implementation assessment work plan over the next few years?
Thank you. Yes, you're not wrong that it's very ambitious. I mean, I think one of the key things that this structural change reflects is the enormous amount of work in recent years on the standards setting of the ICS in particular, but many other things as well, and that we're now in a much more sort of implementation-heavy phase of work. So you'll be pleased to know I can be a bit less numbers-heavy this time in my answer. Judy already mentioned the 25-29 strategic plan, and from my perspective, what it really emphasizes is implementation as a key priority. And as I said, we're picking up the baton from some very significant development work last year. So you'll be pleased to know that planning for the Insurance Capital Standard, or ICS, and the CONFRAME implementation assessments is already well underway. Thank you, Peter. And to sharpen our focus on core objective 4 and deliver high quality and credible assessments, responsibilities, as we've just been discussing, have been reallocated between the IAC and the SSC. My view is that this strategic shift allows us in the IAC committee to concentrate exclusively on implementation assessments and ensuring that consistent application, as it says on the slide here. Our activities going forward will span two key areas. So supporting robust implementation of standards like COMFRAME and the holistic framework that I've already talked about, and picking up a bit on what Farzana's just been saying, providing tailored support to our diverse membership as well through initiatives such as the peer review process, the self-assessment tool, and the member assessment programs that I mentioned earlier. The idea behind this, hopefully, is very clear. It's that this balanced approach is better able to address the needs of both advanced and emerging economies as well. I'll give you a couple of examples, perhaps. So the peer review process on ICP 13, focused on reinsurance, involved 80 jurisdictions and will offer an unparalleled view of global reinsurance practices, enabling us to help strengthen supervisory practices across jurisdictions. The recalibrated scoring criteria and the upcoming aggregate report will also provide really valuable insights for enhancing implementation consistency. And the peer review process report, which will be published in published in Q1 of 2027, which will share examples to enhance implementation, will also assist in that work. I'd also like to mention the relaunch of the self-assessment tool, already live on our website, so please do check it out if you haven't already. Has been a really great development in further empowering supervisors to assess their observance of ICPs and strengthen their own frameworks. This migration ensures the continuity of the tool for jurisdictional self-assessment and provides instant feedback on observance levels of the ICP standards, which I think really enhances its accessibility and its utility. Another notable achievement is the advancement of the member assessment programs, or MAPs, in Oman and Costa Rica, with plans to use our experiences to refine the program so even more members can benefit in the future, including by conducting regional thematic maps. Really importantly, though, given the size of the agenda ahead of us, to deliver these ambitions, we'll need to nurture the capacity of IAIS members to serve as assessors. Now, really pleased to say we've actually seen progress here of late. We now have 30 member representatives having served as assessors this year, and that's up from numbers in previous years, and it really reflects the growing scale of our efforts. And looking ahead with the ICS and COMFRAME implementation assessments starting next year, we recognise that that's going to require significant resources from both members and the IAIS Secretariat. Sorry, Roman. And realigning implementation support and capacity activities to the SCC ensures that those areas receive the attention they rightly deserve, particularly for emerging and developing economies, while then ensuring that the IAC can focus on our own ambitious assessment agenda. So one of my first tasks as chair would be to make sure that we are properly resourced, both, as I say, within the membership and within the Secretariat, to deliver all of this important work. Thanks.
All right, thank you very much. For my next question, I would like to have the slides with the core objectives, is it possible? Yes, perfect. So now we are moving to geometry. As you can see, the way we are looking at our core objectives is not like pillars, it's more a cycle. And it's actually a mutually reinforcing cycle of activities. And I think that's very important, makes very important for insights from one committee or outcomes, insight of outcomes from one committee to be shared with other committees. And sometimes we see the subject matter expertise that has been developed in one committee for purpose of one project becomes relevant or foundation for the work of another committee. For instance, when a strategic topic or initiatives moves from one phase in the cycle of activities to another phase of activities. So I would like to not turn to Dieter and ask you the question, how will the committees ensure that they can work collaboratively and with the necessary feedback loops going forward?
Thank you, Roma. I mean, that's an interesting question. And it is very important to note that across the four core objectives, they are, as you say, Roma, they are not independent pillars. You cannot do risk monitoring assessment without knowing what happens on the standard setting or capacity building side. When you do implementation assessment, that may impact, again, your standard setting or your risk monitoring. So it's all intertwined. And I think the figure that's on screen here helps us to understand a little bit of those dynamics. Let me give you two very concrete examples. Again, sorry to mention it, the structural shifts paper. We do the risk monitoring and the trends, and that has led to an issues paper. And within that issues paper, one of the reflections that are made at the end is maybe we need to also look at our standards. Maybe there is an opportunity to see whether the standards are still fit for purpose. I think the issue paper concludes that they broadly are. Nevertheless, doing that exercise is useful. We have noticed when we're setting up the issues paper that there is a need for supervisory guidance on many of these trends to help supervisors get around the additional complexity that come along with these trends. So that's one example of a feedback loop between the risk monitoring and other parts of the IAIS core objectives. Another example, when you do implementation assessment and you notice that there are big gaps in certain areas, that may be an interesting feedback loop to the MRC, because that may determine some of the risks that you want to monitor if you know that there are big implementation assessment gaps. So that will require us for chairs here to discuss from time to time how we see things evolving. You've mentioned as well, Romain, subject matter expertise. I think that is key as well. If you look at some of the strategic topics at IAIS, for instance, if you want to discuss on the societal role for insurers, one of the things you immediately feel is there is a need from time to time to monitor that, to measure that. And so you end up again in the MRC where you want to monitor certain big risks and trends. If you want to say something useful about the societal challenges, then measuring them, knowing what you're talking about is key. Last but not least, I think MRC will also continue, by the way, to play its role in reaching out to the stakeholders. And we have many roundtables that we use throughout the year to make sure that the big risks and trends that we're working on and that influence IAIS across the 4 core objectives are the right ones. And the only way to know that is to discuss that with stakeholders.
Thank you very much, Dieter. So I think we have set the scene. We have a fantastic new chairs. We have a fantastic new structure. So now we can confidently look ahead in 2026. And so now I would like to ask each of you to highlight maybe 1 or 2 top priorities or flagship projects for your committees and that you will be leading in 2026. So no specific order, but maybe Dieter, you want to start?
I can go quick. So again, GME, we will continue with our global monitoring exercise in the yearly cycle. You know that we have 2 touch points within the year. We have a half-year GMAR, we have an end-year GMAR. We will start to use our new updated methodology. We will continue to liaise with the Financial Stability Board, and we will continue to monitor the big risks and trends across the globe. And secondly, there will be some follow-up work from our structural shifts paper. So that's another big priority, I would say. I'll stop here to be short.
Thank you very much, Dieter. Judy, for the Standards and Supervisory Practices Committee.
There we go. Well, for me, I think a big topic in 2026 will be what comes next on the structural shifts within the life insurance sector. I don't know if you've heard, but Dieter has an issues paper, and it's likely that the topic might move then from the risk and trends monitoring lens of the issue paper into the domain of the SSC, where we could then focus on supervisory materials and developing application papers that would address alternative assets and cross-border asset-intensive reinsurance. And of course, we would do that in close cooperation with the MRC where that's relevant, but also to continue to benefit from the expertise of the working group that's been working on that for a number of years.
Thank you, Judy. Fazana?
Yeah, thanks very much. So there's obviously quite a bit of work planned under the SSC related to key strategic topics like climate, digital innovation, societal resilience. But the one aspect I would like to highlight is our work on providing member support around the areas of recovery and resolution. So you'd recall last year there were revisions to the ICPs and ComFrame adopted related to recovery and resolution. Following that, we've been working on an application paper, revisions to the existing application papers to provide more guidance. The other important thing to note is because of the structural changes in the past, this work would have fallen under the scope of all three committees, but now it's going to fall under the SSC, which also hopefully will ensure more efficient and streamlined governance. But on the actual content, the updated papers will provide more guidance around the criteria for determining insurers that are subject to the requirement for resolution plans. The previous version of the standards, of course, only required resolution plans for internationally active insurance groups where necessary, but we recognize that there may be insurers like domestic insurance groups that may require resolution plans. So the requirement is now applicable to all types of insurers in all jurisdictions. So of course, there will need to be a lot more guidance around that, particularly on how to apply this in a more proportionate manner. And the last thing, just to end off with, is I do look forward to the SSC working very closely with the Secretariat, especially to ensure that our capacity building efforts are not just strengthened, but we also find ways to be a lot more agile, timely, and innovative in terms of how we respond to the needs of the diverse members, especially because they are evolving so fast. And I will leave it there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Fazana. Vicky?
Thanks, Roman. Yeah, a really nice segue, actually, Farzana, in terms of thinking about the evolving needs of the membership, and that's definitely what underpins, I think, the two priorities I could see for IAC next year. So the first one is assessing the implementation of ComFrame and the ICS, perhaps not a big surprise to anyone. And we're going to begin both with a baseline self-assessment exercise, and I think those will be really critical to underpin and lay the foundation for more intensive assessments. The ComFrame implementation assessment will launch covering 61 key ComFrame standards across ICPs 7, 8, 9, 16, 23, and 25. I wasn't going to finish without listing out a whole load of other numbers, but I think that'll be a really important exercise, as I say, providing lots of valuable insights. And the second priority for next year is to enhance our existing assessment tools, again, to better address the diverse needs of the membership. I've already talked a little bit about this, but we'll be planning to strengthen the member assessment programs and the self-assessment tool as well. And I think one thing that I touched on briefly before, but is worth drawing out, is that we are considering options for rescoping maps from a single jurisdictional assessment to make them more regional and more thematic, which we think will allow us to cover more jurisdictions and reach even more EMD members and focus on regional challenges. And we'll obviously be drawing on all of the experience we have in the past few years as well to lead that work going forward. But I think it's very clear we've got an extremely busy year ahead, and I'm really keen to get started and to work with all my fellow committee chairs on these projects. I think, as Dieter was saying, that circularity of the diagram, it's not by accident. It's really going to be important for us to continue to work closely and to feed observations and learnings from our different work into each other's programs as well. And I also forgot to mention what a delight it is to be here in Tirana and to thank our hosts. It really is fantastic. Thank you.
Yes, we are all actually. No, thank you very much. And as always, the IAS will publish early next year the roadmap for the next 2 years, 2026, 2027. You will see the full list of projects and activities, how they fit into the core objectives and the different new parent committees. But again, another very busy year ahead of us. But I think we have all what it takes to deliver once again. So I believe that we have a bit of time for questions. So if there are any questions, that's the last opportunity for this conference. Oh, great. I think there's a question over there.
Hi, I'm Bezena Hinton from the International Actuarial Association. And the International Actuarial Association has established a Climate and Sustainability Committee, which will, among other things, be looking at the impact that climate change may have on protection needs going forward. Are there any particular areas of work that you've got planned that you think collaboration with our Climate and Sustainability Committee would be helpful?
I don't know if anyone wants to take this.
This is really a theme where I think collaboration is very useful, and it speaks a little bit to what I also tried to highlight before. This is really also an area where if you want to monitor the key risk and trends, if you want to capture, if you want to say something quantitative about protection gaps, that can be very helpful to substantiate a little bit the discussion and then to start looking for solutions. And this is an area where we're in scope of the global monitoring exercise, we're still working on that, in what data to collect, how to get there. We're not there yet. And in this sense, yes, collaboration is very much something to consider here, I believe.
Thank you, Dieter. I see a question here.
Thank you very much, Romain. My name is Dennis Noordhoek from the Geneva Association. And let me first start by congratulating the newly appointed committee chairs with their appointment. We are very much looking forward to work with all of you over the next years in the execution of your strategic plan. And Romain, if you allow me, I would also like to take a moment to thank the leadership of the IAIS, not least Jonathan Dixon, as I realize it's his last annual conference, and Arizumi-san for their collaboration and cooperation and openness for stakeholder engagement, which we very much appreciate at the Geneva Association. Now, to my question, and I think I'm taking you back to a number of topics that we have discussed at great length in the earlier panel sessions, and not least in the roundtables. And I'm not sure, I was told this question is fitting in this conversation. Now, we've talked a lot about protection gaps and PPPs. And you probably, if you're familiar with the work of the GA, you've probably seen the report that we launched on safeguarding home insurance, where one of the key messages are that one of the biggest cost drivers in terms of Nat Cat is how we build and where we build. Now, one of the messages I took away from the conversations we have had here over the past day and a half is really around the knowledge that we in the insurance sector have, and to sort of distribute that knowledge to other sectors in government, not least. Now, in the past, we've always been asking the IAIS, right? So what can you do as supervisors? And I think we all have a role here in sort of emanating the knowledge and the risk management knowledge that we have as an insurance sector. So coming to my question here, how should public-private partnerships for climate and disaster risks be structured so that the eligibility for support is tied to enforceable building codes, zoning and retrofit targets to make sure that solidarity mechanisms drive risk reduction rather than subsidize risky developments? And linked to that, and I think that's the most important part of the question, once governments bring supervisors to the table for these PPP discussions, how do you see the role of supervisors in shaping these discussions? And yet linked to that, how can we as an insurance sector best align our own messages to those other parts of governments in sort of enhancing those collaboration and conversations? Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question. I will see if Fazana, you want to take this one?
Yes, I'm going to start and then I'm going to hand over. But what I do want to say, and those are excellent and very practical questions. I think just to remind everyone, as you would know, the Protection Gaps Task Force has been working on developing guidance on the role of supervisors when it comes to addressing Nat Cat protection gaps. There's obviously work that was done this year, but I know that the next step is to actually come up with very practical answers to these questions. And certainly you would need to engage and feed into that, but I'll also hand over to Hannah, if maybe you want to give a more detail around the scope of that work, which potentially addresses the questions that have been asked. Thanks.
Yes, happy to. And I may actually also take a chance to also respond slightly to the earlier question. So my name is Hanne van Voorde. I'm the head of supervisory practices in the Secretariat. And I would add that from the IAIS side, next year, we have probably two streams of work that are really interesting also for the input from the IAA perhaps, but also hopefully answering your question, Dennis. So one of them is that we want to really bring together all the work that is being doing already by many different stakeholders. And we're going to work together with the World Bank to develop some kind of online resource where all the different initiatives on PPPs, on data, on metrics, on building financial literacy, and many other different actions that different stakeholders need to take to address these protection gaps, trying to bring that together in an online resource. So that's something where we're very, very happy to work with the IAA as well, to hear from your expertise, and then we can showcase your work and bring it, make it available to the broader community. Then, as your question was really around protection gaps, public-private partnerships, and what are the design elements to make those really successful? And that's a little bit maybe how I would summarize your comprehensive question, if that's okay. I would maybe want to stress a project we did actually last year, so not in 2025, but in 2024, when together with the OECD, we developed some input for the G7, which set out a high-level framework for setting and developing public-private partnerships. And there, indeed, it stressed also that supervisors should be on the table when there are the initial discussions around developing these frameworks, but also for supervising and providing supervisory expertise. And that framework also set out a couple of elements to consider when setting it up around design, features, around avoiding moral hazard, how to look at the risk transfer between public and private, and a lot of other topics. So I think it's too much maybe to go into detail right now, but that's something that the G7 published last year. I think it was around May in 2024. So that's probably a good resource. And again, we'll probably try to build on that next year as well when we continue to work with our partners.
Thank you very much, Hannah. And I think, as I mentioned, of course, the publication of the roadmap will give you a bit of insight of all the projects and activities. And something that we have not really touched upon is the fact that on top of the core objective, we also have the strategic teams, which are cross-cutting in nature. So we'll continue, of course, very much to work on them. I'm not sure if yes, I think we have maybe a time for a last question. And I see a familiar face here.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Mark Okubo, the General Manager for International Affairs for Nippon Life Insurance Company. Also, I serve as a Sherpa for the Asia Pacific Financial Forum, APFF Insurance, Health and Retirement Income Network under the APEC Finance Ministers process. So I'm very, very happy to be here, and I just echo all the words from Dennis for the IAIS. And this is my 20th participation in the IAIS annual conference, both including as the industry representative and also the IAIS secretariat. So I'm very happy to have a global insurance friendship community. Thank you. And yesterday I have learned that the new EXCO chair was working on the 3 C's. So I would say that I'm working on the 5 E's in the APEC region. So environment, economic growth, and e-technology, and education, and entertainment. I think I'm best known as the 5th category, right? Including the music and fashion show and movie and digital art. But for the coming 5 years, we have decided and agreed to work on the various topics which is related to the insurance sector, such as long-term investment in the infrastructure, capital market, funding innovations, and the sustainable healthcare and disaster risk financing and insurance, and also digital innovation in insurance, especially the promotion of the beneficial and responsible use of artificial intelligence. So mostly, the most recent joint statement by the APEC finance ministers included the APEC initiative on the artificial intelligence, and also the APEC framework, collaborative framework for demography changes. So those are very related to the insurance. So the just like if you're interested in teaming up with APFF on those issues, that would be very appreciated. Now I'm coming up to the question that I'm supposed to ask. So actually, we are now shifting our focus from the commenting on the standard setting activities to the implementation support and also the capacity building in Asia Pacific region. So I'm wondering, any of you, maybe like a implementation assistant committee or other committee, for example, find any areas that for our collaboration, enhance the coordination and collaboration between our work in APEC and IAIS. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think, thank you very much for the question. I think it's probably a similar-ish answer to what others have asked in terms of us looking to look outside at other bodies and learn from what they're doing and collaborate wherever possible. I mean, one of the aspirations that we've just been talking about for, I think, for all of us, but in particular the SSC and the IAC, is to make sure that we are bringing much more voice to the EMDE members of the committee, of the association, and we're doing that through a number of ways, as I said, thinking about how we can flex and evolve the tools that we use to make sure that we're reaching more jurisdictions. On capacity building, I might hand perhaps to Farzana. I don't know if you've got more to say on that, but it's certainly something that's very important to us and the responsibility we have to the entire membership.
I mean, the only thing I would add is that in order for our capacity building efforts to be effective, we do need the benefit of these insights. So it is quite important for us to actually explore those opportunities to leverage off of your insights so that the support we're giving to our members are also practical and relevant and reflective of the realities on the ground. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
All right, so I think now we need to close. I don't want to delay the closing remarks of my Secretary General, but I would like to ask you to join me in congratulating and thanking our panelists for having taken the risk of speaking of the achievement of last year, the perspective of the new year, only 2 days after having been appointed. So thank you very much for having that. And I think we all agree that 2026 is going to be incredibly busy, incredibly important in terms of the work of the association, but we are in very safe hands thanks to the new leadership. Thank you very much.